Hey everyone, it's Hornby here. Welcome back to my YouTube channel here, and on the heels from my last personal vlog here. Here we are up to number 56 here, and I talked about the game memories with the Sega Genesis, as I actually owned the Sega Genesis here. But personal vlog number 56 here, I'm going to talk about my gaming memories with the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, or the SNES as it's abbreviated, as I didn't own the Super Nintendo, as I did decide after I had the Nintendo Entertainment System, when I moved up to the owning a 16-bit console here. Maybe I don't know, did I fall for the marketing campaign about who has blast processing there, and you see that commercial with the dual, we have a one, race car and then another crappy van here. But now we'll talk about the system that was on the crappy van with the 1970s, 60s, 70s style TV there. But I also had some great memories with the Super Nintendo Entertainment System without actually owning it, because I definitely had exposure to the games from friends that either brought their system over, or we traded games, and they got exposed to the Sega Genesis there. But I almost wish that I was able to have both systems, because if I would have had one or the other, I would almost would have said I wished I had that system and I had that system instead. So that definitely says it was two great systems at the time here. And now let's talk about the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, or the SNES here, which definitely was a nice follow-up from the Nintendo Entertainment System here, and obviously the first game that I definitely remember and have fun playing, and I still plan playing it today, here and there, is Super Mario World here. Definitely was a very, very great adventure that elaborated from the side-scrolling platformer that the Super Mario games had in the Nintendo Entertainment System here, because it definitely was a fun. It still stands the test of time, even though we're almost gonna have to say that game is 30 years old here. Talking about the Super Mario World with Yoshi there, I mean, definitely was very innovative on how it stepped up to the 16-bit era there, and with Yoshi, and I think there was like 96 levels, and it kind of got rid of the worlds, but it had different areas, and also what made that game fun and has a high replayability factor is the fact that some levels have more than one exit, which was definitely revolutionary, and was definitely fun to play. It catchy music and different crazy themes, and you saw new enemies, and including that football player that either throws baseballs or kicks footballs or just runs. Hey, who'd you thought you could put a plumber who rides a dinosaur that has a football player that you gotta avoid? That was genius. But Super Mario World definitely was definitely a classic game, and I had fun playing it despite not owning it, and I guess you could say I've owned it in different capacities today. But man, it would have been fun to play that in addition to Sonic the Hedgehog here. But it was either pick one or the other scenario that I had. I wasn't that well off, and I could only have one, and it was more complicated to have two systems then. It's easier to do that now, as now we have a bigger variety of games, and also emulation options as well. But yeah, that was definitely the first game that I had fun with on the Super Nintendo. And then the next one, I remember the Super Mario All-Stars, which I remember renting that when my friend had a Super Nintendo over, I should say, and it was definitely a nice collection to update the classic games, with the first three, including the Lost Live levels there, and you're wondering where the heck did that come from? And now, I mean, it's still a great game. It was different when you look at how the original Super Mario Brothers was, and then it went to Super Mario Brothers 2. but then there was two different versions, as the Japanese had the second version, which was a lot more difficult than the first version, and they definitely weren't screwing around in that version. I don't think I actually have finished the Lost Lives, believe it or not, but it was definitely a nice updated version where they showed, those 4 games there, and that was definitely kind of nice to relive those. I mean, even if they just ported it over as the original, to have the original authentic experience. But it was definitely also a great update there too, and obviously other Super Nintendo games that I enjoy. Well, I definitely was stunned at the differences with the NHL games. I know everyone looks back on the NHL '94 there, and I know both systems had different processing power and sound chips there, so they had different music there. So looking back on the Super Nintendo, I mean, I actually thought the Sega Genesis version of those NHL games were more superior than the one on the Super Nintendo there. So I won in that case by owning the Sega Genesis there. But it definitely, for being the hockey fan in me there, and it was still neat and revolutionary at the time when suddenly you got a game and those games had licensing rights. You understand that more why that was able to be the case, where it was EA that was able to get licensing rights so they could actually use the NHL logo, team names, and get the player names in the game there. And so I definitely thought the Genesis version was better, but it was still fun to play. It was hockey at the end of the day. You're playing hockey, and hopefully have your team go on to win the Stanley Cup there. And so that was the sports games there. I mean, it wasn't as many sports games I played on the Super Nintendo, because this was just playing in here and there through friends and rentals there. But another one that definitely was also fun, which I actually think the Super Nintendo version was more superior than the Sega Genesis version, because I played it first on the Super Nintendo, then I played it on the Sega Genesis, was the Street Fighters game, especially Street Fighter 2. I thought the Street Fighter 2 was better, and it sounded better, and it played better on the Super Nintendo than it did on the Sega Genesis. It just wasn't the same experience there when I first played it. So I guess, while I say the Sega Genesis had the better NHL game, I think Super Nintendo had the better Street Fighter game. And now that I've done a few more into gaming memories videos, and now that I'm trying to progress what I've owned and played, now it's just where I can open up where I compare it to other versions, because this definitely also opened up the competition, because Nintendo used to seem to have the monopoly there after the video game crash in 1983, where it used to just be the Intellivision and the Atari, and then eventually it was the E.T. game that people said, oh, this video game thing is just going to be a fad now. But 1985, the Nintendo Entertainment System came here in North America, and here we are. We're almost 35 years later, and we still got video games. So I'm not sure if it's a fad. I think it's an actual trend, an actual legitimate form of entertainment here, and obviously it's still something I miss, but I just don't have time, and work responsibilities get in the way. But being as I'd still rather go to sport events and hit the road there too. So that also encompasses my time too. So I look back and have these nostalgic memories here, and also other Super Nintendo games that I remember playing that I think I remember playing this version, and it wasn't the same, but I remember playing Mega Man 7, and I was thinking, this is not as good as the original games, especially 2, 3, and 4. I own 3 and 4, and I rented the heck out of number 2 there, and Mega Man 7, I realized, oh, they're up to 7 now. This is the classic series, and I do remember playing that, and everything was more up to date, naturally from an 8 to 16-bit era there, but I think when it comes to Mega Man, it doesn't do justice. It has to stay in the original form. It just Super Mario has evolved well into the next generations, but not Mega Man. It only seems fitting that he stays in the 8-bit form there. And yeah, Mega Man 7 definitely was a lot more difficult game. And I know I briefly touched on the X series, and oh man, that was much more difficult there. So I didn't. This was just briefly touched. I never had time to play or master it because I never owned it. But I remember playing those, and then another. It was kind of just a fun way, and it wasn't really anything that leads you to a job career. And it definitely was kind of like the old version of Microsoft Paint on steroids is Mario Paint. And I definitely had fun with that game, just playing around, making music. But and I remember that Fly game, and yeah, that was just a fun game about drawing and painting on. And it had a little mouse there, and I remember having fun playing that, and it was just fun. I mean, it was kind of pointless and how they animated the whole thing, but yeah, that's definitely some gaming memories I have with the Super Nintendo there. I mean, I don't remember playing actually the next Punch-Out game. I remember I remember playing the original, which I'll mention on my overall things that I missed there, because there were stuff that I played that I played and I didn't mention in that video there, despite how long the Nintendo Entertainment System was, and it's the system I was the most nostalgic for. So definitely had most memories in that, but it was a system that I think I also had the longest earlier. Looking back here, I mean, the Genesis only had a few days, and this is when video games started getting advancing, where it got to the point where you wanted that next console the next few years after the library increases and different games come out, and of course visually it looks a lot more appealing there. But yeah, I mean, I don't have as many memories with the Super Nintendo as I do with the Sega Genesis, and I mean, there was a lot of games that I played on both systems. I mean, actually I did remember playing some Mortal Kombat on the Super Nintendo. I think the Genesis version was better there, and I mean, yeah, that'd be a crime if I didn't mention this game in the Super Nintendo. A couple of them. One is Mario Kart. That was the one that started off all the kart games that you see rip-offs and that, but Mario Kart was definitely another fun game where it's just a kart racing game, adventure racing game that didn't get to the adventure stage yet, with one game in particular that I'll mention to when I get to that system here. But yeah, it was definitely a quirky racing game that I enjoyed that. I think it's hard to say what I think is the best Mario Kart. I'll have to wait till I get to the later versions of my gaming memories and look back on. But I mean, obviously it looks dated now because it came out in 1992 there, but it was revolutionary. It almost like a lot of things, if you put Super Mario in, if you executed it well, and the team behind it, I'm going to have to say definitely knows how to make great games, because, I mean, you can't necessarily put Super Mario Brothers on anything and it's automatically good. I mean, but definitely was revolutionary in that to have that in there. And it seemed revolutionary and groundbreaking at the time with the graphics. Keep in mind it was 16-bit, and they don't seem to promote this version as much, but I seem to actually enjoyed it a lot more. Was the first Star Fox game. I just found that was cool. I think Slippy and Froggy, I have to get back into that game sometime, but I remember I just totally remember the Star Fox and how great and cool that looked at the time. And I'm thinking, whoa, neat, oh boy. And You know, I mean, it obviously looks all blocky and choppy by today's standards, but video games has definitely evolved. That's why I'm intrigued by the younger generations now, where now you got a huge, you know, library of games, oodles of games, systems to choose from, and the fact that when you look back and you're like, video games used to look like that. I mean, even I was born just after the the television was before my time, and ColecoVision and Atari was in my infancy, where games was all just one screen. And then the Nintendo Entertainment System pushed the envelope where it went beyond just the one screen. But yeah, I mean, Star Fox there. And then I remember this game, and I always had fun playing this one. It's called Gradius 3. It was just a fun shooter, and I always liked all the weapons you build up. I mean, you pick your selection and combination of weapons and get far in that game. And that game also teaches you about life in general, because you build up, and you build up all your weapons, and then you hit and die, and I almost say, I gotta have to start cheap again. That kind of teaches what life is like, because sometimes you build up, and then something happens, and then you got to start from scratch again. And Radius 3 seemed to give me that tough lesson there too. And yeah, that was a fun shooter game. I don't know what made it so fun, but it was. It had cool music and that. But yeah, Gradius 3. I think it was kind of I guess you could say, if you go back to the Williams game, I think it was called Defender, and Defender 2 was kind of like that on steroids, but it was kind of an, build up on that. And it was Konami that made that game, and I also do remember playing, on the Genesis, but the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game, especially that Superior Arcade version there. So, yeah, I mean, these are kind of all the memories I have with the Super Nintendo there that I played here and there for not owning it, but I do have some memories there. But obviously the most superior game, I almost figure, would be just worth having the Super Nintendo system alone, would be just for the Super Mario World and the All-Stars, and that seems to be the two games that's absolutely worth just having that system alone there. If you were given a choice and you could only play a couple games there, it would definitely be the All-Stars and the Super Mario World there. And I mean, I think I remember playing the 16-bit version of, I think there was a Tetris, it was called Super Tetris. It didn't seem as fun as the original on the Nintendo. I think it was jazzed up too much. I mean, it's not that I disliked it, but it just, it seemed to jazz it up too much. And then I remember playing a 16-bit version of Yoshi's Cookie, and was another. And I think I actually also remember playing the 16-bit version of Dr. Mario, and maybe I was just stubborn then, but I just remember those original versions and how great they were, and it was just kind of tough. I think it was kind of tough for those game creators too to make those games, to translate up to the 16-bit era. And I said just the same thing with that Mega Man 7. Just, I mean, I think there is hacks out there and ROMs out there that you can get a NES version of Mega Man 7. And I guess then going back to the Mega Man, what was studying too is that it's a choose-your-own-adventure game. And other than the first game, up to 2 through 6 at the time, you had 8 bosses to choose from, and you go in any order. But in the Mega Man 7, you only had to start off with 4, and you had to beat those 4 before you get to get the next 4 bosses before you do the usual Dr. Wily thing. And I definitely found that game a lot more difficult, and just wasn't the same with especially how proportionally big he looked. And yeah, I mean, those seem to be all my memories. Not as many. I mean, I still have nostalgia with the 16-bit systems. More of the Sega Genesis because I actually owned it, and here and there with the Super Nintendo, and I think they're great systems overall, and definitely tells you the quality of the product when you have one and you wish you had the other. And I think if I had one, I wish I had the other. I mean, it was definitely a decision made, and I did decide to go the Genesis route. Maybe it was that brilliant marketing campaign that definitely swayed me, and that's what it is. And but it was still the original Nintendo Entertainment System. I think is definitely the one I'm the most nostalgic for. So yeah, if you have any memories, I mean, obviously there's lots of titles I didn't touch on that you out there would talk about, and there's one particular title I haven't played yet that's exclusive to Nintendo. When I get to the GameCube, or not the GameCube, the N64, I'll mention that, and I regret that I didn't play this particular game earlier. But so if you mention that in the comments, I'll say you'll have to stay tuned for that. For what game that is that I haven't played yet, believe it or not. But yeah, so that's all my Super Nintendo memories I can think of right now. I mean, I'll make gaming memories overall what I missed, and I'll make note of games that I say, oh, I didn't mention that or that with that system here. But if you enjoy everything I do on my YouTube channel, just make sure you hit like, subscribe. I mean, these personal vlogs is one of my minor things I do on my channel. Same with the Attempt Economy, but mostly I recap Calgary sports here and the four major teams and recap any news and games and that. If that sounds like everything you're interested in, just make sure you hit like, subscribe, and capture moments at sporting events or scenery videos when I'm out on the road there. So as I say, I have hit the 100 subscriber mark, so thanks for everyone who's subscribed to follow along here, and let's keep this thing going here. And I always say happy gaming, and I'll see you in the next video. And I guess the next gaming video will be the system that I had after the Sega Genesis there. So not going to say it would necessarily be the next personal vlog here, but if you're just looking for the gaming content, eventually my next gaming memories will be on the next system I had after the Sega Genesis here. But I still have some memories with the Super Nintendo, but not as much. As I said, I didn't own it, and I still got exposed to great games and probably the highlight games that that system offered. So I'll see you in the next video here.